Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. Dan Lobby, once again joined by Tim Bielik and Lance Reisland. Last week, we gave you the quarterbacks and Lance and Tim's quarterback big boards. Today, we're going to shift gears and we're going to look at the top players that each guy has here in July, heading into the 2027 NFL draft. Obviously, Browns fans hoping that maybe one of these quarterbacks will give them a reason to kind of know some of these top non-quarterback players that maybe the Browns could get with a high pick if they don't need to play the quarterback game next year. So let's get to it. Let's go through our top five. I think I know who the number one guy is probably going to be on both of your boards, but I'll say this: the biggest chance for variance is to have Lance lead us off here, because who knows who Lance could have at number one.
Well,
I feel like
very fair.
I feel like he never leads us off, so I feel like he needs to start.
Fair.
At least this time, he needs to start. I feel bad that don't really get to go first.
Well, I think that's very smart, though, if you do a scouting report on our drafts, because you always go smart before you go crazy. So this one is so easy to pick, even for me. Jeremiah Smith is obviously the first pick in the draft.
Yeah.
He obviously big physical guy. You don't have to go into too much, but for me, I evaluate the receivers at three levels: the ability to get off press coverage, the ability to get off in zone, because where you release in zone is just as important as you're releasing against man to find those holes. At the catch point, he's elite. And then he's a run after catch guy too, even with that big body. So he gives you some slot elements as well. So really, really impressive. I loved him in the Oregon game a couple years ago. He's done a ton of good things, but physically, obviously he's second to none. So if you think about the NFL success of receivers, they haven't even been the number one receiver at the Ohio State. So yeah, I think that's an easy one. I think you're smart for starting with me on that one, because even I can't screw that one up.
I was wondering if maybe you'd go a different direction, because Tim, I'm assuming if you would have led this off, you would have led us off with Jeremiah Smith as well.
Yeah, I mean, he's the most interesting prospect I've ever seen, maybe ever, because this may be the only player I can ever remember that may not have a single weakness as a player. And that's insane to think about, because every draft cycle we say, like, this guy needs to work on this or that or that. I genuinely don't know what Jeremiah Smith needs to work on, other than just don't get hurt in 2026 and you're going to be the first non-quarterback off the board. That's pretty much it. And I know the draft cycle always picks holes in players, like could be a little faster. He, could be a better blocker and that sort of stuff. I mean, with Jeremiah Smith, I mean, sure, maybe there's things to work on, but how do you find those in his game? It's like he is the total package, like maybe best receiver to come out since Calvin Johnson. And like I think is in that tier. I don't know if he's the otherworldly athlete that Megatron was, and there's a reason his nickname was Megatron, because he could just do so much on the football field. Jeremiah Smith, is as close as I think we've ever gotten to that. And I think the moment I think I personally kind of realized that he was something else. I filled in for the Ohio State guy, a couple of the Ohio State guys for a game in 2024 against Iowa. I think that was middle of the season, and he posted up a corner, kind of like in basket. He like boxed out a corner and one-handed, like one of the most casual one-handed catches I've ever seen. I'm like, this dude is different. Like, the dude is just just completely different player to everyone else. Like, I think I legitimately think after his freshman season, if he had gone into the NFL after his freshman season, he would have been a top 10 receiver the second he stepped in an NFL camp. The second he stepped in an NFL camp. That's how good I think Jeremiah Smith is. And legitimately, he's in that category. The one thing is he's in the category of so many other guys. His only weakness is he's not a quarterback. That's the only reason he's not going to go number one, number two, maybe not even number three in April, depending on the quarterbacks. It's literally the only thing keeping him from being the number one pick in next year's draft.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look back at the last two drafts, had he come out, maybe the quarterback still would have gone number one overall, but he would have definitely gone number two in those drafts. Like, that's just how good he's been. And now we get to watch him in college for another year. Lance, I'll throw this at you because, look, let's see if there are any holes to poke in this. The last time Ohio State had a receiver who was considered an alien, a guy who was clearly, the next great Ohio State receiver, that was Marvin Harrison Jr. It hasn't hit for him yet at the NFL level. Maybe it still will. I mean, he's been good, but not the level that we were talking about Marvin Harrison Jr. I think we're talking about him in some of the same ways we're talking about Jeremiah Smith. How is Smith different?
Well, physically, he's better. He's bigger, stronger, can do different things. He's also a little bit more sudden and twitchy, so he gives you that inside-outside threat. So where Marvin Harrison has trouble going inside because of his length, Jeremiah Smith's tall, but he plays with great bend, and he plays with the ability to do some slot receiver stuff, which gives you a bigger route tree. You have the inside-outside route tree, gives him a huge advantage. Now, I will say two things that could hurt a player like Jeremiah. First of all, where does he go? Where's the quarterback and how is the offensive line? Because that football is still a team game. And that could obviously be an issue because you're only as good as your offensive line. You're only as good as the pass protection. You're only as good as your other receivers. Harold Fannin could be even better if there's balance, right? So there's got to be other players on that thing because they'll take him away. Now, the other thing that hurts him is his greatness. And when you're that great, you're physically better than everybody else all the time. Now, I think he will be physically better than everybody else, maybe at some point in the NFL, but he's going to get challenged because there's weeks he plays, he's just physically better. And do you get, it doesn't seem like this, but, guys like that, it's hard not to, I would assume it's hard not to just know you're better. And if he doesn't have his A game, if his releases aren't exact, if his hands aren't exact, those are things that get those dissected in the NFL. So it'll just be the adjustment of he has not been really pushed in a couple years now. What's going to happen when he gets pushed? What's going to happen if they double? If he goes to a bad team, he doesn't get touches. Does he become frustrated? Those all things. Obviously he has all the skills through the. It's like John Elway type good, right? This is a no brainer, in my opinion, but. There's some things that still have to happen. How is he going to be? It sounds kind of weird, but how is he going to be moving away from home? How is he going to be in a different system? Does he understand the NFL playbook? Does he, whatever it may be? There's still a transition because if you would have told me Marvin Harrison wasn't going to be dominant, I don't think he's as good as Smith in college, but I really thought he was going to be dominant too, and he just hasn't been.
And I think too, like there is, not that he didn't go against some good corners at the college level, but it is different when, you get to the NFL and there's Denzel Ward over there. There's Derek Stingley. There's, whoever you want to throw out there. These guys who are the top of the top cornerbacks in the NFL, and they're going to be going against him. That is a different level of competition, and that's an adjustment. Tim, how do you think he'll handle that?
I think he'll handle it well. I feel like he's a young man who's got a really good demeanor. I think when you hear him talk, he sounds like a pro in a lot of ways. And I think, that's an attitude that's going to benefit him. We've talked so much about, the athleticism that Jeremiah Smith has. He's an otherworldly athlete as far as a receiver, but I think and I'm not as much of I don't know so much technique and stuff as Lance does, but for me, I see a receiver who doesn't just rely on his athletic ability. He has some nuance to his game. He understands where he needs to be, understands how to get separation, not just with his speed, but some quickness as well. And, I think he's the last real product of the Brian Hartline finishing school of receivers at Ohio State now that he's at USF as their head coach. And this is like the crown jewel of that finishing school. So with Jeremiah Smith, I think, to me, I'd have to think in my head of the most complete receivers that come out of the draft last handful of years. The only one I think I'm trying to think, has there been a receiver other than Carnell Tate drafted higher in the last 5 years than Jamar Chase was? Because I'm trying to think about that.
I guess it depends how you would categorize Travis Hunter.
Right, yeah. And I thought he's a receiver, but it sounds like he's going to play corner in Jacksonville. Yeah. And having watched him play.
But he wasn't drafted just because he was a receiver, so I think that's different.
Oh, no, absolutely not. Yeah, he was drafted to be receiver corner. But I think with Jamar Chase was a guy who stepped in day one. I remember everybody talking about how much he struggled in the preseason, how much he looked like a bust. And then week one comes around, catches a long touchdown. And we're like, oh, wait, this guy's really good. And he didn't even play in 2020. I think Jeremiah Smith has a chance to be just as impactful right away. Obviously, he's not going to go to a Joe Burrow team because the Bengals are not going to be picking that high. And even if they somehow are, they're not going to be taking a receiver. But you get the idea that Smith is the kind of guy that can elevate any quarterback because he has such an he has an advanced understanding of the game where he's not just reliant on his physical tools, that he has some more savvy than that.
Yeah, I'm going back now. You had let's see, in 2022, there wasn't anybody. 2023, there wasn't anybody. In 2024, you had Malik Neighbors at 6. But yeah, there's not a lot of, and of course, Marvin Harrison at 4, but there's not a lot of years where a receiver goes that high, especially if we're talking about like the number 2 overall pick.
Yes, I mean Jeremiah Smith should I think he's easily going to go top 5 again. I think the only thing that is going to be dependent on his draft slot is only dependent on how many teams in front are taking quarterbacks. If teams keep trading up into the top 3, top 4, Jeremiah Smith might barely be a top 5 pick. He's wherever he goes in this draft, I think he's going to be the steal of the draft. Calling it right now.
Well, I'll say this too. You know what I love about what Jamar Chase did? That was when I became a Zach Taylor fan. If you go back when the Browns played the Bengals, I watched the first full 6 games of Jamar Chase's career, and they didn't do anything crazy with him. They didn't put him in the slot. They really put him on the left side, and he ran hitches and goes, slant, sluggos, right? That's all he ran. And it didn't make him think too much. And that could be another thing that slows you down a little bit early on. They just don't need to overthink it with Smith. Just get him the ball because he's that good. But that's what I really like. That's when I became a Zach Taylor fan, because they didn't overdo it with him. Go be better. And that's, Smith could be the same way.
I didn't know we had a Zach Taylor fan on the podcast. That's kind of breaking news here.
He gets 5. Go ahead.
I'm going to have to bring you down to Cincinnati for a training camp practice at some point.
Yeah, he's a 5 out guy, so that's why he always struggled blocking Miles, because he's like, I don't care, I'm getting 5 receivers out every time. So I would have shipped on Miles, but I appreciate Zach Taylor's ability to get 5 out regardless of what you do, and he's amazing at having an answer. So yeah, I'll put it out there now. I'm a Zach Taylor fan. I admit.
FYI, right. FYI, if you take me up on my offer, we're not going to Skyline Chili. I will never be a Skyline guy. Before we get back on track, I just want to put that out there in the ether.
All right. Appreciate
it. All right. So look, we ended up agreeing here on number 1. Tim, why don't you? I'm going to put Jeremiah Smith there as your number 1 guy. Why don't you give us your number 2?
Let's go with Colin Simmons, the edge rusher from Texas, 6'3", 240. And I think we talked during before the podcast that if you followed high school recruiting in 2024, some of these guys, you're going to have heard these names before, because 2024 was a really good class, obviously highlighted by Jeremiah Smith, but Colin Simmons was right up there as well. Former 5-star, he was an impact player like Jeremiah Smith from the second he got on the field at Texas. Was a big reason they went to the semis in 2024 and lost to Ohio State in what was honestly a really close game. I think that was the biggest test Ohio State had in the entire playoff, more than Notre Dame. But with Simmons who's a guy who's been out in tremendously productive, 21 sacks, 29.5 tackles for loss, 6 forced fumbles over 2 seasons. Looking at his numbers from last season, he had a sack in each of his last 5 games. Was held quiet against Ohio State. I thought the Buckeyes did a really good job against him, and not just, in part because they kind of had a conservative game plan to protect Julian Sayin a little bit. And that was before we figured out who Bo Jackson was. But I think they really had a good game plan on Simmons to kind of shut him down. But with Simmons, he's almost the total package, I think, as far as an edge rusher goes. You look at him, his bend is great, his first step is really good, and his motor is relentless. Like, he is just constantly just going after a quarterback and creating havoc. Like, he feels like that franchise edge rusher to me that maybe I would put higher than David Bailey. Pretty much the only thing with Colin Simmons is I would like to see him get a little stronger. 240 pounds, maybe a little slight in the NFL, maybe get that up to 255. And I think you're really working on something here. But this is a young man who's got so many elite tools to work with.
Lance, did you have him in your top 5?
I do. I got him at 3. Yeah, I got him at 3. And I have in caps my super educated notes. It just says bend. And when I take notes, I just try to figure out what's going to translate. And his bend is fantastic. Now, I will say this. I think he becomes really good really quick if he's in an odd front. If he plays on air outside and that tackle's covered inside of him, he's going to be, if you think about like an LT front where they're going to cover the nose, they're going to cover their tackles, and then you have him as an overhang. If I'm playing him right now, your best bet is to go right at him. That's your best bet because he's 240. Your best bet is to go heavy, get some tight ends in there, put a wing in there. Not that he can't play the run. He can really play the run, but you got to beat him down with body shots because he's only 240. So if he goes to an even front team, obviously he'll have to bulk up if he's going to play that 5 technique in a little bit, but he can, not everybody, nobody in the NFL, nobody at any level of football is just a 4 front or just an odd front. They have a primary front, so they'll find matchups for him. But if he's in an odd front and he plays off the edge out there with that tackle covered inside of him, he's going to be a really good player, Micah Parsons style player, because he has that type of bend and get off.
Tim, you said something interesting there, and I think it speaks to sort of what people have been saying about this class. You said that you would have him ahead of David Bailey. Is this a guy sort of like how you would take Jeremiah Smith, in this last draft? You probably would have taken him 1, taken him 2. Is this a guy you would have taken in the top 5 of this past draft?
Yeah, I think so. I certainly would have. Weight concerns aside, because I think this is a kid. He was only a sophomore last year, so he's got time to add weight to his frame. I'm not smart enough to know like how much weight he would need to add, like if you would have to go to 260, 265 or whatever. But kind of going to Lance's point, it could even be scheme dependent where he could, if it was a 3-4 base and he was kind of an outside linebacker, almost like a James Harrison or Sean Merriman type, he could play at 240 and just absolutely just run around left and right tackles all day and just create chaos. Certainly, the early production is great, playing in the SEC and having that immediate production and sustaining it over the course of a second season. I think that those are outstanding things, check marks in Colin Simmons' box, no question about it.
Okay. So Lance, we've got you with your number 1, Jeremiah Smith, and Colin Simmons, your number 3. So let's fill in this missing spot. Who's your number 2?
Leonard Moore, corner out of Notre Dame. He's the best man corner in this draft. And what I like about him is you can kind of use you can kind of think of like a Denzel Ward. So Denzel Ward is really good in press coverage, but Denzel Ward with his short area burst, his lateral movement, everybody calls it something different. We used to call it a mirror technique, right? So he just kind of sticks with you like a shadow. He's not very handsy. If you watch Denzel, he'll jam you. But Denzel is just athletic enough to just kind of follow you, and that's a talent that Leonard Moore has. Now you're talking about a guy with 5 picks. He had 7 more pass breakups last year. He's long, 74-inch wingspan, so he plays long. He can contest at the high, at 50-50 balls at high point in the football. But the thing I like, sometimes if corners get handsy and they rely on their ability to jam or they rely on the physicality of playing corner, then guys can beat you with their twitchy or suddenness. If you're a mirror corner, which there are very, very, very few elite mirror corners in the world, he's that guy. So he doesn't need to get his hands on you all the time. He'll try to reroute, do all the things that he's going to be taught, but he's just a guy. He has tremendous recovery speed, things like that. The fluid hips, everything that we talk about as coaches. But for me, just his ability, I'm going to be your shadow. I'm just good enough to be your shadow. I think that makes him. In fact, I think he would be the smartest pick for the Cleveland Browns next year. If you want to know the truth, if quarterback position is, if it gets figured out without having to draft one, then for me, Leonard Moore is the pick.
Well, they've had some success taking cornerbacks high. Mm-hmm. We saw that, of course, when they took Denzel Ward at number 4 overall, which surprised some people. But you get a guy who can play like that. That's always worth a top 5 pick in my mind. Tim, is he in your top 5?
He's number 3. So Lance and I are actually in some really good agreement here. Yeah, good. Yeah, pump the fist there. I think Moore kind of fits into
me, not you.
Hey, well, I mean, great minds think alike. So I think with Leonard Moore, you brought up the Denzel Ward thing. Imagine if Denzel Ward was 6'1". Like, imagine if we didn't have any size concerns, if Greg Williams back in the day hadn't been concerned about Denzel Ward's tackling because he's not small, because he's smaller. Imagine if that guy was 6'1". That's Leonard Moore. And the data actually backs up what Lance was talking about with, really good man coverage. Last season for PFF, he had a man coverage grade of 92.7. Zone was not bad either, 76.1, but clearly, a really good man coverage corner. The frame for his position, he has the ideal frame. I think every team wants that 6 foot, 6'1" corner. I think every team in the NFL is always looking for that as receivers are getting bigger, stronger, faster. Having that size there is important. And he was like one of those guys that really stood out to me when Notre Dame went to the title game in 2024. He had a really good postseason as a freshman, 3 pass breakups. Him and Christian Gray were both really good in that secondary. I don't remember who it was that was in that coverage on the famous 3rd down and 1 throw to Jeremiah Smith. I mean, I'm gonna give him a pass because I don't think anybody thought in the universe thought that they were actually going to throw that football on 3rd and 1. So, I mean, I give Ryan Day credit for making that call. So I'm not going to put it on whoever was covering a corner. But I think Leonard Moore, this is a guy who also has really good ball up production, 18 pass breakups, 7 interceptions, 3 forced fumbles. So this is a guy who not only has the size, knows how to cover, he knows how to make plays on the football. So there's a lot to really like about Leonard Moore. One of the only concerns I have, his penalties went up from 1 in 2024 to 4 in 2025. Obviously, we're nitpicking a little bit. I think, penalties are going to happen sometimes in college in a corner position when you're kind of on an island. But in the NFL, when the pass interference rule is just however long the play is, as opposed to 15 yards in college. When in college, if you're beaten, you're beaten 40 yards down the field, just pull the jersey, you're only going to get about 15 yards. That's a penalty you can live with. In the NFL, you're not going to get away with that. So I think if he cleans up the penalties, continues to work on his tackling, you got a corner who I think has a chance to be a stud corner in Leonard Moore.
All right. Well, I think you guys have been spending too much time together. I just want to say that. So I don't think you should. I don't think, Lance, you should go to a Cincinnati Bengals training camp practice. That would be a bad idea. Let's see if we can get a little separation on these boards.
I go off the rocker a little bit here, so don't worry.
All right. Well, let's go with. All right. Let's do Tim at number 4 here, and then we'll go back to you, Lance.
I'm going to stick with the trend of former 5 stars. I'm going Dylan Stewart from South Carolina, 6'5", 245. And as mediocre South Carolina was, they may be the ultimate off the bus team. Between Lenora Sellers, Nick Harbor, Dylan Stewart, you have 3 guys at premium positions who look the part when they get off the bus. You're talking about a guy in Dylan Stewart who has outstanding athletic ability. Production, I think, is very good. 11 career sacks, 22 and a half tackles for loss over 2 seasons. Not great, but still decent. And another part that I like, he also has 6 forced fumbles over 2 seasons. So I like that in edge rushers. I talked about that, I think, a year or 2 ago when we talked about TJ Parker, who ended up being a first-round pick, even though he wasn't the top 10 pick that I thought he could be a year ago. When you have edge rushers that know how to pop the ball loose, that's an invaluable tool in an edge rusher's toolkit. The ability to force those turnovers, to make the quarterback uncomfortable. Dylan Stewart has that. Now, what I want to see him do is in 2026, I want to see him be more efficient in pass rushes. So he had 37 pressures, which is pretty good. But the problem is he only had about a 13.1% win rate per PFF, and that's in comparison to guys like Ruben Bain, who I think was at 24%. And I think ideally you want to be in the upper teens to low 20s with that pass rush win rate. So Stewart, I think, needs to become more efficient as a pass rusher and be able to maximize those opportunities better than he did as a youngster. That kind of tells me, he's still really athletic, but still working on technique, and it's not a bad thing. I feel like if you're an NFL team or GM, if you always want to bet on the upside and take a chance on a guy who just has incredible physical tools, but just needs some tweaking a little bit, needs some refinement in his technique. And I think Dylan Stewart is one of those, maybe kind of a lower floor type of guy than Colin Simmons, which is why I have Simmons higher, because I think Simmons' floor is solid starter. Stewart's floor is lower than that, but ceiling's almost as high. So I think even just from a safe value, that's why I have Simmons ahead of Stewart, who, like Simmons, I think could be better served to gain a little weight going to the pros. But Dylan Stewart, for me, quality edge rusher. That's why he's number 4 on my list.
Yeah, Lance, the get off the bus team thing with South Carolina is real. I mean, you just see, and they have these edge rushers wearing single digits and all this stuff. And Dylan Stewart, one of those guys, is he in these one of these last 2 spots for you? And if not, what do you think of him?
He is not. I think he's fantastic. And what ends up happening, and not, I'm using the body type as example, but if you look at Alex Wright, he did it at UAB, but this is a kid who does it at South Carolina. He doesn't have a ton of stuff in his repertoire of pass rush moves because he's just so freakishly talented. So what ends up happening is you get the NFL and you got to learn that stuff. But he has things you can't teach, and you win with things that you can't teach. You can teach guys hands. You can teach them It kind of goes like the Austin Barber for the Browns' new tackle. His hands were poor. But you can fix that. You can't fix length. You can't fix get off. You can't fix bend. You can't fix these things. These are natural given things. No matter how much work you put in, you can get them better. So, yeah, he's a get off the bus first guy. But more importantly, he's a guy that right now is just winning because he's better. And he's not winning because he's better in the MAC or at a lower level Division One. He's doing it in the SEC. So, I mean, he's doing it at the highest level. So, talented guy, he's the prototype. You say, hey, let's draw up an edge guy. Let's draw up a defender. Let's draw up, all these positions have different how they should look. They have a lot of them look like that.
All right, so Lance, give us your number 4.
My number 4 is KJ Bolden, safety from Georgia. And I love him. I think he's fantastic. He goes into my all football player team. He's not the biggest guy in the world. He runs real well, but he's just a guy who physically gets after it. And I love Georgia secondary guys. I think they do a lot of things really, really well. I think he's a safety that can play down in the box. He can be the one high hat. He can be a 2 high hat guy. He can play safety. He can be your nickel corner. He can do a bunch of different things. In today's NFL, it's important that you have those guys because they give you the ability to be versatile on defense. This idea of 3 safety looks you can see that teams, even the Browns, if Miles Harden can't play it, then you're going to go a 3 safety look and you're going to help those safeties when they're in man coverage, et cetera. So this is way beyond stats for me. This is just a guy I really like to watch on film because he's a football player.
I'm going to say this. I know Lance loves safeties. There's always some safety that Lance falls in love with, sometimes early, sometimes day 2, day 3 guy. Tim, I think with the safety position, it always kind of goes, there's 1 or 2 guys near the top and then there's a gap, but I think we're going to start to see that close a little bit. I think teams are going to start to value that position more. So with Lance having him at number 4, is Bolden your 5th? Is he on your list? What do you think of him?
He's not on my top 5, but I will say with Lance, I think KJ Bolden's a good guy to fall in love with as far as the safety position goes. Former 5-star, remember, like Ohio State really wanted him extremely badly, even though they had Caleb Downs up until last season. So, I mean, Georgia being able to hold on to KJ Bolden and get him was big for them. Looking at his numbers, good production, 32 solo tackles last season, 5 pass breakups, so he really stepped up as a pass defender last season. And when I look at this class, the one thing that stands out is the talent at the premium positions. We just talked about a couple edge rushers. We talked about, obviously Jeremiah Smith. Last podcast together, we talked about the quarterback. So this is a really good premium position draft. So I think this may not be the type of draft where, KJ Bolden is considered like a top 5 or top 10 player, but certainly, he's got a lot of value. I did see one scouting report where he was compared to Malachi Starks, and I think any team would love to have a Malachi Starks on there because he was such an outstanding player in college. I think he had a solid, but now he's in Baltimore, so Browns are going to get to see him a couple more times over the next couple of years. But I mean, Georgia's recent history of producing defensive backs and getting high draft picks has been really good. So KJ Bolden, I think, has got a chance to be the next great one coming out of Georgia.
All right, so Tim, who do you have at number 5?
Rounding on the top 5, I'm going back to the premium positions. Trevor Gooseby from Texas, the left tackle, 6'7", 312 pounds. Took over as the starter last season for Kelvin Banks Jr., who was a first-round pick. I thought he had a pretty good season, just 3 sacks, 10 quarterback hurries in his first season as a starter. And, doing that in Texas in the SEC when, you got to protect Arch Manning. There's so much attention on Arch that teams are scheming up to get after him. The fact that he only gave up 3 sacks and 10 hurries in his first season as a starter, I think that's pretty good for Trevor Gooseby. And his frame for the position is really good. I mean, we're talking 6'7", 312. And this is a tackle that, comes in a year after a draft where we had so many tackles coming off the board that were mostly right tackles. Francis Maui Noah primarily, in particular as a right tackle. Spencer Fano, I think we all thought was a right tackle, even though he's going to play left for the Browns. Mostly right tackle guys. Trevor Gooseby looks like a pure left tackle through and through. He's got the size and he knows how to move. He's a great mover. And I've said it 1,000 times. I'll say it 50,000 more if I have to. For me, if you can't move as an offensive lineman, I don't want you. And that's Trevor Gooseby. When you can move like that at that size, that's outstanding. there's going to be some interesting debate over the next handful of months. Who's going to be the number one tackle? Because I think you could also put LSU's Jordan Seaton in there, the former Colorado tackle. But I have Gooseby ahead of him just because I think he's got better production he's produced against better competition than Seaton has at Colorado. With Gooseby, I want just, we'll see what he looks like in year 2 as a starter. Just needs more experience. And like any offensive tackle, or really any player, getting ready to go to the NFL, you want to see that technique continue to evolve, continue to develop. And, as Arch Manning continues to get better, and more important for Texas, the pressure is going to be on, Gooseby and that offensive line to make sure they keep him upright. Because if Texas is going to have really good if Texas is going to if Texas is going to have a good season, they need they need Arch Manning to be really good and healthy. And to keep Arch Manning healthy, you need really good left tackle. And that's where Trevor Gooseby fits in for me.
Do you like Gooseby, Lance?
Yeah, very big kid, physical, long. I think I don't have him as my number one tackle, but I have him in my top 5 tackles, and I love his ability to move. And I think he's the best combination of pass blocking and run blocking in the draft. I think there's, the Browns, if you think about a guy who can become a mauler, he can be. He can also anchor pretty good for 6'7". He's a big guy, but he doesn't get, sometimes you watch the Kentucky game, which I watched, looking at other people. Occasionally, a smaller guy will get under his numbers, and that can happen with long guys. Again, as they learn to use their hands better. These guys are all, these defensive ends, these offensive tackles, they're all better, right? And as they get to the NFL, everybody's better. So they'll learn the stuff. But again, another guy, you can't teach his length. You can't teach the punch. I agree. He's the best physical mover. So if you're thinking zone or if you're thinking screens, he's probably the best mover in the draft in space. He's really, really good.
Okay, so let's go ahead and wrap up your big board here, Lance. Who's your 5th?
Well, I'm going with Carter Smith, the tackle out of Indiana. And the reason I'm going with Carter Smith is because I think he's the best pass protector in the NFL. And now I'm thinking more of a Browns kind of concept. But let's just say offensively, if you go with more of a players over plays scheme, he gives you a really good tackle who can block multiple fronts. He can block multiple schemes, gap schemes, zone schemes, inside, outside zone, mid zone. He can run power, counter, pin and pull. He gets to the second level very well. He's pretty solid on screens. So he does a lot of really good things in the run game. He's more of a waller than he is a mauler. And what I mean by that is he understands where the ball's going, and he'll get his backside between the defender and the ball carrier. So he understands where holes are supposed to be. He understands responsibilities. The offensive line coach at Indiana does a great job. So it's not that he's not physical. He is very physical, but it's more important for him to make sure that he's opening up the hole he's supposed to, as opposed to knocking the guy down. And I don't think there's anybody with a better kick step in college football right now. I don't think there's anybody. And if you think about, getting a guy off the edge, I think he's, you're talking kickback 3 to 7 yards, depending on what the set is, jump set, etc. I think he's the best pass set guy in this draft. So I always, there's a number of other guys, and this could change. And this is just like the quarterbacks I had yesterday. My 5 through 12 is pretty similar right now. Obviously, this year will take, but I went with him just because I think in a pass-happy league, got to be able to pass protect. And in an offense that relies on making sure you're in the right spot, as opposed to Wyatt Teller knocking you down. He's not huge, 6'5", 308, but this guy can pass that and is going to be a very good pro.
So, Tim, where did you have him? Obviously, you had Gooseby ahead of him as far as tackles. Is he right behind him in your mind, or where do you have him?
I would have him 3rd in my tackles right now, behind Gooseby and Seaton. And I do got to give some love. Carter Smith's a Columbus kid. Played his high school ball at Olentangy Liberty. And you're talking about a really cool story. Another just part of this Indiana rise from, this nothing program, the Big Ten, till all of a sudden a national champion. And I will admit, I was kind of surprised that he didn't come out of the draft into the draft last year. I get it to an extent because, you're going into a tackle class that we know is deep. We saw just how many tackles went off the board. I think in the first 21 picks of the draft. I don't have the exact number in front of me, but it felt like every other pick in that draft after Spencer Fano was a tackle. So I could understand why Carter Smith, didn't want to be part of that. He goes back to school. Now he has a chance to kind of prove, that he and his offensive line weren't just great because they had Fernando Mendoza behind him, because they had this really good RPO scheme where, you never know what the play is going to be, whether it's a run or a pass until the play actually happens. So I think when you look at Carter Smith's data as well, again, 2 sacks, 7 hurries last season, allowed only 2 sacks each his last 2 seasons since Kurt Cignetti got to Bloomington. So there's a lot of great pass blocking data with Carter Smith. I do think, he will have to put on some weight. 305, the low 300s, I think is too low for an offensive lineman in the NFL. I think he's going to have to add 10 to 15 pounds, but what he has right now is a really great base to build on.
Okay, there we go. We've got your top 5. So let's wrap this up. Give me a wild card. It can be first round pick, day 3 pick, Lance, some undrafted guy that you're going to talk us into over the next however many months. Give me your wild card, Lance.
Let's go. I got a bunch here. Let's go with I'm going to go with Wyatt Young. I love Wyatt Young. He's a receiver out of Arkansas. Wyatt Young. So I have him. He's in my top 10 of receivers, but he's 6 foot. He's 195. For me, he's just a guy who gets open. And I love guys who get open. And it's a generic, and I'm not comparing him to any receiver, but when I talk about those 3 really good things, like Jeremiah Smith beat you, not only is he technically sound, but he beat you with, athleticism, all that. So he's a combination. This guy is Cooper Kupp-esque, right? He just gets open. He understands leverage. He's better against zone than against man. So he's a receiver. I got a bunch of receivers that I think can be really productive. Where offenses have gone in the last 10 years in college football, they get pro ready because there's a lot of combo reads. So I'm going to go with him. I think he's going to be a pretty good player. And I wanted to kind of pick outside the box there, but I like guys that maximize what they have and have the ability to get open against guys who are supposedly better athletes. So really good player, plays well in space.
Tim, how big of a wild card is that?
That's a name I wasn't honestly familiar with, and I looked it up, and played in North Texas last season, and he's going to follow Drew Mestemaker to Oklahoma State. So I think that's kind of fun. I talked a little bit about Mestemaker on the quarterback podcast. So I think because there's going to be so much attention on Mestemaker, it's going to put more attention on Wyatt Young. And even looking at his numbers last season, as I pull them up, I literally just had them up here. So
I said the wrong school there. Sorry about that.
That's okay. That's fine. Yeah,
it's early. It's early.
It's early, and we're still the transfer portal's made it all crazy. So solid size, 6 foot, 195, 70 catches, 1,264 yards, 10 touchdowns, and an 84-yard reception last season. And I think he's got a chance. I look at this receiver class outside Jeremiah Smith, even just like at some of the names out there. I talked about Ryan Coleman Williams. Now he was Ryan Williams. Now he's Ryan Coleman Williams. Took a step back last season. We'll see if he can bounce back. Indiana's got Charlie Becker, who really came alive last season. I know there was so much, attention on Omar Cooper Jr. But Charlie Becker was sensational last season. And then obviously they had Nick Marsh, who's really good. Texas has now added Cam Coleman to go with Ryan Wingo. I like Texas A&M's Mario Craver. So this can be another really good receiver class. So with Wyatt Young, he's got a chance to really rise up, especially if he and Mestemaker can have the same connection in Stillwater that they did in Denton.
When you watch that film, I know you guys will watch a lot of film, Mestemaker. Go back and watch the North Texas film, because you watch Mestemaker, you're like, who is he throwing to? This guy's making plays all over the field. And then you're like, well, sometimes you get those FBS guys, a lower level or FBS guys there, but he can run after catch, almost 800 yards, run after catch, yak yards. I'm telling you, this guy's really, really good. Now, we'll see what happens when he plays with the big boys here at Oklahoma State, but really, really like him. And I think he's, my Ivan Pace kind of guys where I'm not even sure how high he's going to go, and I don't care because I think he's going to be productive.
All right, Tim, that's a tough act to follow. Who have you got for your wild card?
I'm going with a guy who might have been the second best running back in college football last season, Ahmad Hardy from Missouri. Now, I want to preface this. He's coming off, an awful situation. He's recovering from a gunshot wound he had in May of 2026. So, we'll kind of see what strength, what condition he is, what kind of health he is when he's able to play in 2026. But if he's close to what he was in his last 2 seasons, he's got a chance to be the best running back in this upcoming draft, right up there with Ole Miss's Kwan Lacey, who, as much as anything, I think he made himself money in the playoff. I thought Kwan Lacey was sensational, but I'm going to give Hardy the love here. Was great as a freshman in 2024 at ULM. 1,351 yards, 13 TDs. Goes to the SEC in 2025. Even better. We're talking 1,600 plus yards, 1,649, 16 touchdowns last season. He had 47 explosive runs. That's 10 yards, 10 run yards, so 10 yards. Runs at 10 yards or more. I'm sorry, I keep tripping over my own words here. 257 rushes last year, so that's an explosive run rate, 16.73%. I'd like to see that be a little higher if possible, but that's still a really good number for a second-year running back, especially in his first year in the SEC. And what's the other thing that stands out, he had the most yards after contact of anybody last season, 1,181. So that's almost 500 yards of his rushing last season came after contact. That's absolutely incredible. And that tells you the kind of runner Ahmad Hardy is. He has outstanding vision, outstanding power. He does, I think, need to continue to do work as a receiver, because right now he's mostly just a runner, not really a pass catcher. If he could develop into more of a pass catcher, I think you'd be looking at a very complete running back in Ahmad Hardy. And obviously, his health situation is the most important thing. Hopefully he can get back to 100% so that we can all kind of get to see the stud that Ahmad Hardy was in 2025, because I think college football this upcoming season will be even better if Ahmad Hardy is able to play at full strength for Missouri.
Lance, is he your top back?
He is not. He's right there. He is not my top back. My top back, I have, I like Nate Frazier. I have Hardy at 3. I like, Brown. I don't really, my backs I have like question marks next to, besides the top 3. I'm not sure yet, just because you got to watch them, when they become featured guys and things like that. But I do have Hardy as my guy who's going to last the longest in the pros. And one thing I've been doing, following Tim's lead on some numbers things, the one thing that worries about like a Quishon Judkins, his greatest quality is his ability to run violently. And in the NFL, that doesn't work when it comes to tread on the tires. So how long can a guy play? The thing I like most about Hardy when you watch his tape, and then I'm looking some stuff up, is his ability to make people miss. So he avoids those vicious shots. I'm going to go way back to Marshall Faulk, but what made Marshall Faulk so impressive to me is not that he didn't get hit, it's avoiding the vicious, those hits in the hole and those hits on the sideline. He does a great job of protecting himself. Really good jump cuts, all that kind of stuff. But that's what I like about him, his ability to make people miss and not take the ridiculous pounding throughout a game.
I will say with Hardy, going back to the data and backing that up with what Lance said, 97 missed tackles forced by Ahmad Hardy last year. The only one who had more was Cam Cook from Jacksonville State at number 3, Kawan Lacey. So, I mean, admittedly, I don't have my Kawan Lacey notes in front of me, but I really remember just what he looked like in the playoff, and I thought he was just sensational for Ole Miss in those playoff games. So much talk about Trinidad Chambliss in particular, that fourth quarter he had against Georgia in the Sugar Bowl, which was one of the most amazing things I've watched in a while as far as football goes. But Kawan Lacey meant so much to that Ole Miss team as well. So I'm curious what he's going to look like in 2026 now that Lane Kiffin is no longer there. Can he be as impactful without Lane Kiffin's schemes? I think if he can, you're going to have a real fun 1-2 race potentially at running back with Hardy and Lacey.
All right, your guys' boards were pretty similar there early. Lance is citing stats now. I do think I don't know when you're doing it, but you guys are spending too much time together.
Well, the thing I like is when I don't know. I like when my film nonsense matches up with the reality of it. So like when he goes, Hardy had 97 missed tackles, I was like, oh, that's good, because I didn't know that. So that's when my film matches up with what he got. Yeah, that's what I like. So yeah, we were I was smart for a couple picks there, and then I fell off the wagon there like I normally do. So
well, I mean, part of it I think we can credit a lot of this to the great unknown in the NFL draft. I don't think anybody. I had Fernando Mendoza, for example, last year, number 4 among my quarterbacks, not thinking he was going to be going number 1, no question about it. And we just got to see these guys play. That there's another full season of college football. Who knows what it's all going to look like with how crazy the transfer portal is, the 12-team playoff. We got a lot of unknowns right now. And I think part of what is going to make these next few months interesting for these players is how do you handle the draft spotlight? When you feel like you got a good chance, you're trying to show off to NFL teams that you're worthy of being drafted into the NFL. Some guys rise up to the occasion and others kind of fade under the pressure of the draft spotlight. So it's going to be interesting to see how this goes. So like we have an idea, But, there's a chance when we come back in, January or February to look at these lists that they could, especially outside kind of our top three, which we have, I think, the same three guys in the top three. There's a chance that after that, it could look like a mess.
Okay, well, that was the non-quarterbacks. If you missed the quarterbacks pod, that was last week. Just go find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, our YouTube channel, which is Cleveland Browns on cleveland.com, or just search Orange and Brown Talk on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. If you're not subscribed at those places, get subscribed. You can also find us on all your socials. Just look for Orange and Brown Talk. Give us a like, give us a follow. That was Tim and Lance. We'll try to get together during the season, maybe. And of course, if we're unable to do that, we'll have a bunch of draft pods coming up next year, leading to the 2027 draft, and we'll old takes exposed some of these boards that you guys put together here. But I always appreciate you guys giving me the time here, especially in the middle of summer. For Tim and Lance, I'm Dan. Thanks for listening, everybody.